Tonight, you'll probably eat meat without thinking about it once. You'll open a package, you'll heat it up. You won't picture where it came from. But for most of human history, getting that meat meant walking towards something that could kill you and hoping you were faster, smarter, or more patient than it was. The real story of how ancient humans hunted is stranger than spears and cavemen. It's a story about endurance, deception, and tools so clever they still shape the weapons you use today. Start with the body you're sitting in right now. It doesn't look like a predator's body. You have no claws, your teeth are flat and useless for tearing flesh. You are slower than almost every animal you'd want to eat. A rabbit outruns you. A deer humiliates you. Even a house cat can beat you in a sprint. So, how did a slow, clawless, soft-skinned animal become the deadliest hunter on the planet? The answer isn't strength, it's heat. Around 2 million years ago, something happened to the human body that most people never learn about in school. Early humans lost their fur, almost all of it, and they gained something strange in return. Millions of sweat glands, more than any other mammal on Earth. This wasn't for comfort. It was a hunting weapon. Here's what that meant. A cheetah can outrun you over 100 meters, but a cheetah overheats in seconds. It has to stop, pant, and cool down, or it will die of heat stroke mid-chase. Early humans didn't have that problem. They could sweat while moving, releasing heat through millions of pores instead of panting through one mouth. So they didn't have to be fast. They just had to be relentless. This method is called persistence hunting, and it's one of the oldest hunting strategies known to science. Researchers Dennis Bramble and Daniel Lieberman published groundbreaking work showing that the human body, upright posture, long legs, springy tendons, and heat-dumping sweat glands was built by evolution specifically for endurance running, not sprinting. Running for hours. Picture it. A small group of early humans spots an antelope in the heat of midday, the worst time for any four-legged animal to be chased, the best time for a sweating biped. They don't run at full speed, they jog. Just fast enough to keep the animal moving, never letting it stop to rest in shade, never letting it cool down. The antelope sprints ahead, then stops, panting, overheating. The humans catch up. It runs again. They catch up again. Hour after hour under the sun, the animal's body temperature climbs toward a lethal edge while the humans barely break a sweat because sweating is exactly what their body was designed to do. Eventually, the antelope collapses from heat exhaustion. Not from injury, not from a weapon, from simply being unable to outlast a naked, upright ape with too many sweat glands and too much patience. This is why you can run a marathon and an animal built like a cheetah cannot. Your ancestors traded raw speed for something rarer, the ability to keep going when everything else has to stop. But endurance alone doesn't explain every kill. At some point, running an animal into heat exhaustion wasn't enough, or wasn't practical, and that's where the tools begin. The earliest hunting weapon wasn't a weapon at all. It was a rock. Before spears, before bows, ancient humans threw stones. Simple, sharp-edged rocks, thrown hard at close range, could stun or injure an animal enough to slow it down. Anthropologists studying early Homo erectus sites have found piles of fist-sized stones alongside butchered animal bones, evidence that throwing wasn't incidental. It was a skill. And it's a skill your body is still strangely good at. Here's something that should surprise you. Humans can throw objects faster and more accurately than any other animal on Earth, including chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, who are far stronger than us in almost every other way. A professional pitcher can throw a ball over 90 miles an hour. A chimpanzee, despite being 2 to 3 times stronger in raw muscle, can't come close. Researchers studying the shoulder and arm structure of early hominins found that changes in the shoulder, waist, and hips created a kind of biological slingshot, storing energy in ligaments and releasing it in a whip-like motion. Your shoulder is a leftover hunting weapon. You just use it to throw baseballs now instead of rocks at a fleeing hare. Once early humans mastered throwing, the next innovation was obvious. Give the rock a point and put it on the end of a stick. The wooden spear appears astonishingly early in the archaeological record. In Schöningen, Germany, archaeologists uncovered spears estimated to be around 300,000 years old, carved from spruce and pine, perfectly weighted with the widest point near the front. Exactly how a modern javelin is balanced. These weren't crude sticks, they were engineered. At first, spears were thrusting weapons, used up close, which meant hunters had to get dangerously near an animal that could gore, trample, or maul them. This is where teamwork mattered as much as the weapon itself. Groups of hunters likely surrounded large animals, driving them toward natural traps like cliffs, bogs, or narrow ravines, where a cornered animal became far easier to approach and kill. Evidence of mass bison kills at cliff sites in North America and mammoth remains found near ancient bog sites in Europe suggest this wasn't rare. It was strategy. Then came a shift that changed everything: the ability to kill from a distance. Around 70,000 years ago, maybe earlier, ancient humans developed a tool that seems almost unfair by comparison to a thrown spear. It's called the atlatl, or spear thrower. Picture a stick, roughly 2 feet long, with a hook or cup at one end that holds the base of a lightweight dart. Instead of throwing the dart directly, the hunter throws the atlatl itself, which acts like an extension of the arm, adding leverage the same way a lacrosse stick adds reach to your throw. The physics here is simple but brutal in effect. A human arm alone can throw a spear maybe 40 or 50 miles an hour. An atlatl, by extending the length of the throwing arm, can launch a dart at speeds rivaling a compound bow, sometimes over 100 miles an hour, with enough force to punch through the thick hide of a mammoth from 20 or 30 feet away. This meant hunters no longer had to be close enough to be gored. They could strike and retreat and strike again. Archaeologist John Shea, who has spent decades studying the stone tools of early Homo sapiens, has argued that projectile weapons, like the atlatl, may be one of the key reasons modern humans outcompeted other hominin species, including Neanderthals, who appear to have relied more heavily on close-range thrusting spears. Distance killing wasn't just safer. It was a leap in strategy that changed who survived and who didn't. But a fast-moving dart is useless without a point sharp enough to actually kill. And this is where stone tools become almost obsessively refined. Early stone points were simple, flaked by striking one rock against another to create a sharp edge. But over tens of thousands of years, the process became an art form called flint knapping, where toolmakers would carefully strike a stone core at precise angles, removing thin flakes one at a time, shaping a blade with an edge sharper than surgical steel. Some of these points, especially the famous Clovis points found across North America, were fluted, meaning a long groove was carved down the center so the point could be lashed tightly to a wooden or bone shaft without splitting it. Think about what that means. Ancient toolmakers weren't just chipping rocks. They were engineering a weapon system: shaft, point, binding, and thrower, each part designed to work with the others, refined generation after generation through trial, failure, and observation. A broken point meant a missed kill. A missed kill meant hunger. So the tools kept improving, because they had to. Eventually, spears and darts gave way to something even more precise: the bow and arrow. The earliest confirmed bow and arrow evidence dates back around 60 to 70,000 years, found at Sibutu Cave in South Africa, where archaeologists uncovered tiny stone points too small and light to have tipped spears or darts, but perfectly sized for arrows. The bow changed hunting in a way that's easy to overlook. It was silent, it was fast to reload, and it let a single hunter, alone, take down animals that once required an entire group with spears. A bow works by storing energy slowly, as the archer draws the string back, then releasing all of it in a fraction of a second. That stored energy transfers into the arrow, launching it fast enough to pierce deep into an animal's body, aiming specifically for the lungs or major arteries. Ancient hunters understood animal anatomy with startling precision. Skeletal evidence from ancient kill sites shows wounds concentrated in exactly the areas that would cause the fastest blood loss, meaning hunters weren't guessing. They were trained, and that training was passed down deliberately from one hunter to the next. Alongside weapons, ancient humans developed something just as important: traps that didn't require a weapon at all. Pit traps, dug deep enough that an animal falling in couldn't climb out, sometimes lined with sharpened stakes at the bottom, appear across multiple ancient cultures independently, from Africa to Europe to the Americas. Snares, made from twisted plant fiber or animal sinew, could catch smaller animals by the leg or neck while hunters were away doing something else entirely. This mattered enormously, because it meant hunting wasn't only about strength or bravery in the moment. It was about patience, planning, and understanding an animal's habits so well you could predict exactly where it would walk before it ever arrived. One of the most extreme examples of this planning is the mammoth trap. At a site in Mexico called Toltepec, archaeologists uncovered evidence that ancient hunters dug large pits specifically designed to trap mammoths, then used fire and noise to drive the animals toward the pits in coordinated group effort. Killing an animal that large wasn't about one brave hunter with a spear. It was about dozens of people working together, using the landscape itself as a weapon. And that's the part of ancient hunting that's easiest to miss if you only picture a lone caveman with a stick. Hunting was almost never solitary. It was deeply social, built on communication, trust, and shared risk. Anthropologist Louis Binford's research on hunter-gatherer societies emphasized that successful hunting depended less on individual heroics and more on cooperation, information sharing, and the ability to read an environment as a group. A hunt could fail not because someone wasn't strong enough, but because the group didn't communicate well enough. This cooperative pressure may have shaped something deeper than muscle or tools. Some researchers argue that hunting in coordinated groups was a major force behind the evolution of human language and social bonding itself. You needed to warn a partner silently. You needed to signal which direction an animal was moving. You needed to trust that the person next to you wouldn't run at the wrong moment. None of that works without communication. And communication, refined over hundreds of thousands of years, eventually becomes the ability to sit in a room and tell a story, the same way you're listening to one right now. There's something else ancient hunters understood that modern life has almost erased: patience as a weapon in itself. Some hunter-gatherer groups still alive today, like the San people of the Kalahari, practice persistence hunting exactly as their ancestors did, tracking an animal not by chasing blindly, but by reading footprints, broken twigs, and disturbed sand with a precision that looks almost like magic to outsiders. Anthropologist Louis Liebenberg, who has spent years documenting these tracking techniques, has argued that this kind of close observation of the natural world may have been one of the earliest forms of scientific reasoning, forming and testing hypotheses about where an animal went based on evidence. That means the same mental skill your ancestors used to track a wounded eland across dry earth is, structurally, the same skill you use today to solve a problem, follow a clue, or figure out why something went wrong. The stone points evolved into steel. The atlatl evolved into the crossbow, then the rifle. But the underlying pattern, patient observation, precise tool use, coordinated effort, and the willingness to endure discomfort longer than your prey can endure it, that pattern never left you. It's still sitting in your nervous system, mostly unused, waiting for a chase that almost never comes anymore. There's one more tool that changed hunting more than any spear or bow ever did, and it wasn't a weapon at all. It was fire. Fire didn't just cook meat, it hunted for you. Ancient humans learned to use controlled burns to drive entire herds of animals across grasslands, funneling them toward cliffs, rivers, or waiting hunters hidden downwind. A wall of flame and smoke is terrifying to almost any animal, and terrified animals don't run in careful, calculated directions. They run away from the fire, in a straight line, which is exactly where hunters wanted them to go. Archaeological evidence of fire-driven hunts appears on multiple continents, suggesting this wasn't a one-time discovery. It was reinvented again and again by different groups who all noticed the same thing. An animal that's afraid is an animal that's predictable. Fire also solved a problem that had nothing to do with catching the animal and everything to do with keeping it. Before refrigeration, before salt curing was widespread, a successful hunt created a new emergency. Hundreds of pounds of meat that would spoil within days. Smoking meat over a low fire, slowly drying it out while infusing it with compounds that suppress bacteria, could preserve it for weeks or months. This single innovation meant a group didn't have to hunt constantly just to survive the next few days. A single mammoth or bison kill, properly smoked and dried, could feed a group through a lean season. Hunting big, dangerous animals suddenly made more sense because the payoff lasted so much longer. Once an animal was down, the work wasn't over. It had barely started. Butchering a large animal quickly was its own specialized skill, and ancient toolkits reflect just how seriously it was taken. Alongside spear points, archaeologists find scrapers for removing hide, burins for carving bone and antler, and small razor-sharp flakes used almost like a scalpel for separating meat from muscle with minimal waste. Nothing was thrown away. Hide became clothing and shelter. Sinew became thread and bowstring. Bone became needles, awls, and eventually, fishhooks. Even the animal's fat was rendered down and used, sometimes as fuel for lamps that let ancient humans work, paint, or simply see long after the sun went down. A single successful hunt didn't just feed a group for days, it equipped them for months. Different animals demanded completely different strategies, and ancient hunters seem to have understood this with remarkable precision. Hunting large, slow herbivores like mammoths or bison relied on numbers and the landscape itself, driving animals toward cliffs, bogs, or narrow passes where their size became a disadvantage instead of a defense. Hunting fast, alert animals like antelope or gazelle relied on endurance and heat, wearing the animal down over hours rather than overpowering it in a single moment. Hunting dangerous predators, like cave bears or big cats, occasionally for territory or protection rather than food, required an entirely different kind of courage. Cornering an animal that could easily kill a human in return, using spears braced against the ground, so the weight of a charging animal drove the point deeper into its own body. And hunting small, fast-moving prey like rabbits or birds relied on tools you might not expect. Throwing sticks, similar in concept to a boomerang, that could be hurled into a flock or a running animal's legs to stun or trip it, letting a hunter close the distance for the kill. This adaptability is the real skill hiding underneath everything else. Ancient humans weren't just strong, or fast, or brave. They were flexible. They studied the animal in front of them, and they changed their entire approach based on what that specific animal was good at and bad at. A mammoth's size was a weakness near a bog. A gazelle's speed was a weakness under the midday sun. Nothing about ancient hunting was blind aggression. It was closer to a chess match played against a creature that couldn't understand it was being outsmarted. None of this happened overnight, and none of it happened in isolation. A 300,000-year-old spear from Schuningen and a Clovis point from North America are separated by hundreds of thousands of years and thousands of miles, yet both reflect the same underlying process: watch, fail, adjust, teach. Repeat. A hunter who came home empty-handed didn't just lose a meal. He came back with information about wind direction, about which trail the herd favored, about how close you could get before an animal bolted, and that information got passed to the next hunter and the next, compounding slowly across generations until a sharpened rock became a precision-balanced weapon system. This is easy to underestimate because it happened so slowly that no single person alive at the time could have seen the whole arc of it. A toolmaker refining a stone point never knew he was building toward the bow and arrow. A group driving bison toward a cliff never knew their strategy would echo, in principle, in the coordinated tactics of later armies and hunting parties across the world. Progress, in ancient hunting, as in most of human history, wasn't a single flash of genius. It was thousands of small, forgotten adjustments, made by people whose names no one remembers, stacking on top of each other until the result looked, in hindsight, like a plan. And maybe that's the part of this story that says the most about you. You didn't inherit spears or atlatls. You'll probably never track an animal by reading disturbed sand, or drive a herd with fire, or brace a shaft against the ground while something enormous charges toward you. But you inherited the same nervous system that made all of that possible, the same capacity for patient observation, coordinated effort, and relentless follow-through long after the obvious approach has failed. It shows up now in smaller, quieter ways. In finishing something difficult because quitting felt worse than continuing. In noticing a small detail everyone else missed. In trusting the people around you enough to take a risk together instead of alone. So the next time you eat something without a second thought, remember what it actually took to get meat for nearly the entire span of human existence. It took a body engineered to sweat instead of pant. It took a shoulder built like a slingshot. It took spears balanced by hand, points chipped one flake at a time, and traps dug with nothing but patience and knowledge of an animal's routine. It took groups of people trusting each other enough to surround something that could kill them, and it took the discipline to keep moving under a brutal sun long after any sane predator would have quit.